Look, I'm just going to say right off the bat right now that I'm one of the people that has been willing to give J.J. Abrams a chance with Star Wars Episode 9. I've been one of the people that has been pretty positive about him being the director. And then this interview just came out, and I have to say that I'm not that excited anymore about the movie. I don't think that this is a good sign for Star Wars Episode 9. I don't think that this is a good approach that J.J. Abrams is taking. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and you guys can let me know what you think as we talk about this. So, J.J. Abrams explains, working on 9, I found myself approaching it slightly differently, which is to say that on 7, I felt beholden to Star Wars in a way that was interesting. I was doing what, to the best of my ability, I felt Star Wars should be, which I thought was pretty good. I actually was a pretty big fan of Episode 7. I thought that, for the most part, he did a good job with it. And I could see that with the vision that he set up in Episode 7 for Episode 8 and Episode 9, that it was a pretty solid vision, and he had a really good foundation for this trilogy. But it sounds like he's taken a completely different approach after everything that's been happening with the trilogy up to this point. It sounds almost like that J.J. Abrams doesn't really give a crap. So he continues on. It felt slightly more renegade. It felt slightly more like, F it. I'm going to do the thing that feels right because it does, not because it adheres to something. So basically he wants to, with Episode 9, just make what he wants to make and not really feel like he adheres to anything else in the Star Wars legacy. Abrams then points out who he sees this new trilogy for. The trilogy is about this young generation, this new generation, having to deal with all the debt that has come before. And, in some ways, I kind of appreciate that. I think it's cool that they're going to be playing with more of a fallout with what happened in the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. But at the same time, why didn't we get more of that in Episode 7 and 8? That should have been more of the focus of Episode 7 and 8 instead of, and there was some elements of that in there with like Luke Skywalker and stuff, but that definitely wasn't anything, that wasn't the main theme, the main focus of this trilogy up to that point. And now suddenly you're going to make that the main focus of the trilogy of this Episode 9. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to feel naturally set up or anything. You should have been setting this up since Episode 7 so that we could feel like this entire trilogy was in some way a fallout or a continuation of the original trilogy. And now suddenly you're going to make that a thing in this trilogy, and it just doesn't have a proper bridge set up with Episode 7 and 8. So let's see here. He continues, and it's the sins of the father, it's the wisdom and accomplishments of those who did great things, but it's also those who committed atrocities, and the idea that this group is up against this unspeakable evil, and are they prepared? Are they ready? What have they learned from before? It's less about grandeur, it's less about restoring an old age, it's more about preserving a sense of freedom, and not being one of the oppressed. So it sounds like they're just going to continue on with the whole thing of let the past die, kill it, bury it, or kill it, or however that quote goes if you have to, and kill it if you have to, yeah. So it sounds like there's going to be more of that theme going on in this episode as well, which I'm just not excited about. I don't like the fact that they are trying to basically forget everything that happened in Star Wars before, that they're trying to move into a new direction for Star Wars. And even Kathleen Kennedy just says here in this article as well, where is it? I think there is a larger expectation that Disney has. On the other hand, though, I think that Disney is very respectful of what this is, and right from the beginning we talked about the fragility of this form of storytelling, because it's something that means so much to fans that you can't turn this into some kind of factory approach. You can't even do what Marvel does necessarily, where you pick characters and build new franchises around those characters. This needs to evolve differently. She would then, which I agree with for the most part what she's saying right here, but then she continues and says there's a loss of innocence, a sense of innocence that existed in the 70s that I don't think to any extent exists today. I think that has to permeate the storytelling and the reaction to the stories and how they're set up. It has to feel differently because we are different. Evil needs to feel and look very real, and what that means today may not be as black and white as it might have been in 1977, coming off a kind of World War II sensibility. And for the most part, I really don't agree with what she's saying here. Good and evil is black and white. Sure, there's a lot of things that are mixed within all of that stuff that have gray tones to it, but in the case of what is good and what is evil, for the most part, it's pretty black and white. It's pretty obvious what is bad and what is good. And I don't understand why she's trying to complicate things, and the only reason that she's really saying this is because she wants to bring in more identity politics, more political agendas, and things like that into Star Wars as well. And that's really is what's going to continue to complicate the good versus evil sense that we've had in Star Wars in the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. And she's talking about how there was a sense of innocence in the 70s that was in the original trilogy that they're trying to permeate now and stuff. Like, what do you mean? The prequel trilogy had a very similar sensibility, a very similar feeling as the original trilogy in a lot of ways, but at the same time, they were doing their own story, and they were their own type of story around Anakin and all that stuff, but they still had a very similar innocence in Kathleen Kennedy's words as the original trilogy did, because it totally understood what the difference between good and evil were, and it wasn't trying to muddle that with identity politics or political agendas. But now that's exactly what Kathleen Kennedy wants to do. She wants to complicate everything by including her identity politics and her political agendas, and all it's going to do is just going to continue to run Star Wars more into the ground. Anyway, so I do not like the approach that J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy are taking in this article here. They both are very keen and set on trying to destroy the past of Star Wars, trying to destroy the legacy of Star Wars, and build something completely new for a new generation, which in one sense I don't necessarily have a problem with, because the prequel trilogy of Star Wars was in a sense for a new generation as well. But at the same time, it still had the spirit of Star Wars. It still had it still had good storytelling for the most part and all of that stuff. The new trilogy just doesn't have that. It just doesn't have the spirit of Star Wars anymore. The spirit of Star Wars is dead. The heart of Star Wars is dead. And the storytelling, at least in episode 8, has been atrocious, and I'm not excited to see what they're going to be doing with episode 9. With that being said, let me know in the comments below what you think. What do you think about what J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy are saying here? Let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you all very soon in another video. Talk to you later. Bye.